My daughter-in-law looked me dead in the eye and said, "From now on, my husband's paycheck is mine. You can take care of yourself." I didn't argue, I just nodded and started calculating every single expense in that house. 3 days later, the first bill showed up. 1 week later, they finally understood what taking care of yourself really costs. From now on, my husband's salary belongs to me alone. You handle your own stuff. That's what my daughter-in-law Brooke said while she poured herself a fresh cup of coffee I had paid for. My son Caleb just stared at his plate and stayed quiet. In that moment, I realized all the years I'd kept this house open for them had been seen as weakness. I'm Martha, 68 years old, a widow and the owner of this house in a quiet suburb outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm not the type for big scenes or yelling. I watch. I notice. Brooke had moved in 2 years earlier when Caleb lost his job. Back then, I told them, "Come on over, we'll figure it out together." But together quickly started meaning I covered the mortgage, the heating, the groceries while her designer bags piled up in my hallway. Caleb had always been passive, the kind of guy who avoided conflict by looking the other way. But that morning at the breakfast table, she crossed a line. She thought she had the power now that Caleb was earning good money again. She figured I was just a lonely old woman scared of being left behind. I took a slow sip of my tea, set the cup down gently, and looked her straight in the eyes. "All right," I said. No shaking voice, no accusations. Just a simple agreement. Brooke shot Caleb a triumphant little smile like she'd just won a war. She had no idea I was already writing the first invoice in my head. In this country or anywhere, really, independence comes down to one thing: control over your own numbers. If she wanted a business arrangement, that's exactly what she was going to get. I stood up, cleared my plate, and walked into my little office. The days of unconditional mom generosity were over the second that sentence left her mouth. I pulled out the thick folder of household bills, opened my laptop, and got to work. It was time to take the romance out of this household. The first step was done. And honestly, I felt strangely light. Brooke probably thought nothing would really change after her little ultimatum, except she'd have more spending money. The next morning, she opened the fridge and found no fresh deli meat, no organic eggs. I had only bought what I was going to eat. My shelf in the refrigerator now had a small lock on it. When she asked where breakfast was, I just pointed at the empty spot on the shelf. "Everyone takes care of their own part, remember?" I said kindly. Caleb chewed his dry toast and stared at the floor, ashamed. He knew I was never rude, but I was dead serious. I spent the whole morning breaking down the exact costs of running the house, property taxes, trash pickup, water, everything. I had carried it all alone for years, so Caleb could get back on his feet. That ended now. I made a spreadsheet so precise it went down to the last penny. I even calculated the wear and tear on the washer and dryer they used every single day. It wasn't petty. It was just the reality of a shared household, the one she had demanded. That evening, I placed an envelope in front of each of them at the table. "This is your share of the costs for this month," I said calmly. Brooke tore hers open and her face turned beet red. "This is almost as much as rent," she snapped. I nodded. "A house this size costs money. I was giving it to you as a gift before, but since you want financial independence, you'll need to carry your fair share." I told them the payment had to hit my account by the 3rd of the month, or I'd have to start limiting access to the common areas. Brooke laughed nervously, like it was a joke. But when she looked into my eyes, the laugh died. I wasn't the sweet grandma who quietly ran the household anymore. I was the landlord now, and the first late notice was already written in my mind. By the 3rd day, Brooke hit her first real crisis. She loved taking long, scalding hot showers and using her expensive oils. But that Wednesday morning, she walked into the bathroom and found her fancy bottles and towels gone. I had moved everything to a new shelf I'd put up in the hallway. "My bathroom, my shelf," I told her when she confronted me. I'd also turned the heated floor in the bathroom down to the lowest setting. If you wanted warmth, you were going to pay for it up front. It was a chilly April morning, and for the first time in years, the house finally felt like it belonged to me again. At dinner, Caleb tried to play peacemaker. "Mom, does it really have to be like this? We're family." I looked at him for a long moment. Caleb, family shares the hard stuff and the good stuff. When your wife decides your paycheck only belongs to the two of you, that's a business decision. So I'm responding like it's business. It hurt to say it, but it needed to be said. He had to learn that his passivity had consequences. He couldn't let Brooke treat me with disrespect and still expect me to baby him. I saw him swallow hard. He was torn between loyalty to his wife and the comfort I'd given him for years. Brooke stayed quiet all evening, furiously scrolling on her phone, probably looking up apartment prices nearby. I knew she'd be shocked. They were living here for a fraction of what anything comparable would cost. I'd done my homework. Before I went to bed, I turned off the living room lights and set the heat in their part of the house to night mode. If they wanted luxury, they were going to have to pay for it themselves. That night, I slept deeper than I had in years. The first official payment deadline was coming, and I was curious to see how they'd handle it. It was the 4th of the month. Not a single cent had hit my account. At breakfast, Brooke was extra defiant. She slammed her expensive to-go coffee cup on the table and acted like I wasn't even there. She figured I'd cave if she just ignored the deadline. She underestimated me. After breakfast, instead of heading to the garden like usual, I sat down at my desk and printed the first formal notice. It wasn't emotional, just a clean business-like list of the overdue amount, plus a reasonable late fee for the extra paperwork. I slipped the letter into Brooke's handbag, which she always left in the hallway. When she got home from work that afternoon and found it, her scream echoed through the whole house. "Caleb, your mother has completely lost it. She wants a late fee." Caleb came running in from the backyard, looking completely overwhelmed. I stayed in the kitchen, calmly chopping vegetables for dinner. When they both stormed in, I set the knife down. "It's really simple," I said quietly. "In the adult world, there are deadlines. If you want to separate your finances from mine, then the rules of the market apply." Brooke was furious. "We're moving out. We're not putting up with this." I gave her a small, thin smile. "You're welcome to leave any time. According to our old agreement, the notice period for the free living arrangement is 2 weeks. I'll start advertising the in-law suite tomorrow." That landed hard. They had no written lease to protect them, only my past kindness. Brooke went pale. She knew that with Caleb's salary plus all their other debts, they'd never find anything close to this standard. She had gambled high and lost the first round. "Payment by tomorrow noon," I added, "or I'll lock the garage." My car was parked outside. Caleb's expensive SUV was inside. The garage door was electric, and I had the only remote. The next morning, the money was in my account. Brooke had transferred it, probably with tears of rage in her eyes. But she thought that was the end of it, that things would go back to normal. She was wrong. That Saturday, when she went to do laundry, she found the basement door locked. I had the key. "I thought we paid," she yelled down the stairs. I walked down slowly. "You paid for the living space and utilities. Using my personal washer and dryer isn't included." I told them I was no longer willing to clean the house or do their laundry. "I'm not your housekeeper," I said to Caleb while he fumbled with his tie. "From today on, you're responsible for your own area and your own clothes. There's a laundromat in town, or you can buy your own machines and install them in your space at your own expense for the plumbing." Brooke looked at me like I was some kind of monster. She was used to her dirty clothes magically appearing clean and folded in her drawer. Now she was facing the boring reality of everyday life. The rest of the day, I moved my personal things out of the living room. I made myself cozy in my little sunroom, which I now declared my private living space. I took my TV, my books, and my favorite blanket with me. The big living room suddenly looked bare and cold. Without my decorations and care, it was just an empty room. I wanted them to see that a home is more than walls, and that the more had always come from me. If they were cutting me out of their financial life, I was cutting them out of my emotional labor. Caleb looked lost, standing in that empty room. He was finally starting to realize that Brooke had dragged him into a war they couldn't win. The silence in the house became my ally. To turn up the pressure, Brooke invited her own mother, Diane, over. Diane was the type who loved to lecture and stick her nose in everything. They were sitting in the garden, having coffee, when I was out trimming my roses. I hadn't made any cake or coffee for them. Diane called me over. "Martha, don't you think you're going too far? He's your own son. How can you be so cruel?" I set down my pruning shears and walked over. "Diane," I said calmly. "Brooke decided that Caleb's money belongs only to them. That's her right. But it's also my right to decide what I do with my time and my property. If they want to be treated like adults, that's how I'll treat them." Brooke snorted. "You're just getting revenge." I shook my head. "No. I'm setting boundaries. And if you think I'm being cruel, Diane, you're welcome to take them in. You have that big place downtown, right?" Diane suddenly got very quiet. She loved her peace and her perfectly decorated home. The thought of having Brooke and Caleb's chaos in her space clearly terrified her. I turned back to my roses. "I figured your generosity probably stops at your own front door," I said over my shoulder. Caleb sat there ashamed while his mother-in-law scrambled for excuses. It was a turning point. He saw that no one was willing to carry the responsibility I had carried for years without complaint. When Diane left, shortly after she said goodbye quickly, she didn't want anything to do with this if it might cost her something. The kitchen was the heart of the house, so that's where I made my next move. I cleared out all the pots, pans, and dishes I had bought over the decades and moved them into my private space. I left only the few things that actually belonged to Brooke and Caleb, which wasn't much. When Brooke tried to cook that evening, she found only an old, dented pot Caleb had kept from his college days. "Where's the non-stick pan? Where are the good knives?" she cried out. I walked in with my own dinner already made. "Those are my things. Brooke, I don't want them worn out now that we're no longer running a shared household." I sat at the little kitchen table, eating my risotto while she tried to chop onions with a dull butter knife. It was a pitiful sight. Caleb came in, saw the mess, and reached for his phone to order pizza. I stopped him. "Remember, Caleb? The trash has to be sorted. And that pizza box doesn't go in my recycling. You'll need to handle your own waste." He froze, staring at his phone. Every little thing that used to happen automatically was now an obstacle. Brooke was close to tears. All that control she thought she'd won over her husband's money suddenly felt worthless when she couldn't even make a decent meal. They had the money, but they had no structure. I watched them start arguing with each other, not with me. Brooke blamed Caleb for never helping around the house. Caleb shot back that she was the one who wanted to change the rules. I felt no pity, only a deep sense of satisfaction. They were finally learning the value of all the invisible work I had done for years. The kitchen stayed messy that night. I didn't lift a finger. My space was clean, and that was all that mattered to me now. The lines were drawn for good. The following Monday, while they were both at work, I had the locks changed on every room they weren't paying for my bedroom, my office, the sunroom, and the pantry. When they got home, Brooke tried to go into the sunroom like always. When the handle wouldn't turn, she rattled the door in fury. "Martha, what is this? Why is it locked?" I opened it calmly from the inside. "This is my private space. Since we're going our separate ways now, I want to protect my privacy." She raged, accusing me of shutting her out. I reminded her that she had shut me out first when she declared her husband's income belonged only to her. "Money is power, Brooke. That's what you said. I own this house. That's my power." Caleb stood in the hallway staring at the new shiny locks. He understood the message immediately. His mother was no longer the gatekeeper to his easy life. He was now a guest in the house where he used to be the son. The silence in the house grew heavier. Brooke tried ignoring me, but it's hard when you no longer have access to the comfortable parts of the home. They spent their evenings stuck in their bedroom while I listened to music and read in my sunroom. I had drawn my boundaries clearly and defended them with every lock. This wasn't about revenge. It was about respect. If they wanted to treat me like a stranger, then they had to live with the distance a stranger demands. I noticed Caleb sitting alone in the kitchen sometimes, just staring into space. He was the one losing the most in Brooke's power play, and he finally knew it. The whole dynamic had flipped, and I held every card. 2 weeks into my experiment, the truth hit. Brooke got her first credit card statement. With all the new costs for groceries, utilities, trash, and rent to me, her budget for luxury items was completely gone. Even worse, Caleb had stopped blindly believing everything she said. He had watched her try to manipulate me and fail miserably. That night, I heard a huge fight coming from their room. Of course, it was about money. Brooke wanted Caleb to take out a loan for a new apartment deposit. He refused. "I can't do this anymore, Brooke," he shouted. "My mom is right. We've been acting like parasites." I'm ashamed I sat in the hallway and listened. It was the first time Caleb had shown any backbone. Brooke tried to calm him down, calling me crazy and spiteful again, but Caleb wasn't having it. He came out of the room, saw me sitting there, and stopped. His eyes were wet. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was a coward." I nodded slowly. "Sorry is just words, Caleb. Actions are what count." I didn't offer him a hug yet. He still had to finish walking this road. Brooke came out too, her mask of superiority completely gone. She looked tired and older. "What do you actually want from us?" she asked quietly. I stood up. "I don't want anything from you. You wanted independence and I gave it to you. If you're learning that independence means taking responsibility for yourselves, then that's a life lesson." I told them I would sell the house if they didn't find a permanent solution by the end of the month. The threat was real. I didn't need this big house anymore. I could buy myself a nice little condo on the edge of town and enjoy the rest of the money. The fear in Brooke's eyes told me my plan had worked. By the end of the month, the decision was made. Brooke had moved out temporarily to a friend's place because she couldn't afford anything that matched her old lifestyle. Caleb stayed, but under completely new terms. We sat in the kitchen, which was mine again. He had signed a proper, fair, but strict lease. He paid on time, helped in the garden, and handled the heavy grocery runs. There was no more free laundry service or all-inclusive mom package. We were 2 adults living together with mutual respect. Brooke only came by on weekends now, and she followed my rules to the letter. She had learned she couldn't bully me. When she walked through the door, she was polite and reserved. She knew one wrong word, and she'd be asked to leave. Caleb seemed relieved. The clear structure gave him the stability he had lost under Brooke's control. He started taking responsibility for his own life again. For the first time since my husband died, I felt truly alive. I hadn't just protected my house, I had protected my dignity. I spent my afternoons in the garden watching the birds and enjoying a silence that was no longer filled with tension. I regretted nothing. Not the strict notices, not the locked doors. Sometimes you have to build walls to protect the space inside. My peace was more important than anyone else's comfort. That evening, Caleb came into the kitchen with a bottle of wine. "Want a glass, Mom?" I smiled. "I'd love one, Caleb. But we each wash our own glass afterward." He laughed, a real honest laugh. We had found a way to still be family without one person using the other. The boundary had been drawn, and on the other side of it, a better chapter had begun. My life belonged to me again. And that was the most valuable paycheck I could ever imagine. If someone starts treating you like a transaction, don't argue. Just let them pay the real price for everything they've been using.